Hello, today we're going to look at the Gen 3 Lion Tamer detection system for lithium ion batteries. We're going to start at the beginning, which is the power supply. Then we're going to move on to the controller, the switch, the hubs, and the sensors. There's two different types of sensors, and we'll go over those. There's two different types of hubs, which we'll get to later. We're going to be dealing with the direct power hubs along with the direct power switch. The controller is universal between the two different types, whether it's direct power or power over Ethernet PoE. And we're going to start with the power supply. This power supply is the NDR 120-12. It has a ground lug on the bottom, marked here with a ground symbol, a neutral, and a line. This is 120 volts in, hence the 120, and it provides 12 volts output up here on the top. These terminals are negative, negative, positive, positive. So you will need to go from terminal number 1 to terminal number 3, terminal number 2 to terminal number 4 to get your 12 volts. And as you can see, it's got SnapTrack mounting on the back. All of this equipment, with the exception of the sensors, will have the ability to mount via SnapTrack. So we're going to place that down. And now we're going to take a look at the controller. This is the brains behind the operation. It is the Gen 3 controller. We've got two network ports here, and we have our power supply on the bottom. There's a lot of other things here that are not used. This port here, this Thunderbolt port, can be connected to a monitor to do some deep dive diagnostics with, but in most cases is not utilized. Network port number 1 is the network for the Lion Tamer itself. Network port number 2 is to transmit out to a controller using TCP/IP Modbus. So network port number 2 is going to go to our switch and on and into the rest of our system, along with our programming computer that goes to it. On the bottom, you will notice there's a chassis screw right here. What you're going to do is pay close attention to the positive and negative on the power supply plug-in. We got a negative here and a positive there. You need to pay close attention. There is no reverse polarity protection in the controller. So if you wire it up backwards, you will blow the system up. It is not covered by warranty. It is marked here clearly. So we're going to take this screw out, and we're going to show you all of this as we put it up on the wall. Right now, we're just walking through the components. And we're going to plug this in, polarity correct, of course. We're going to grab our cap. You'll notice it's got one screw hole in it. It's going to set around the adapter, if I can get my fingers working correctly, and cover the unit so that it cannot be accidentally unplugged. That is the controller. Now we're going to go on from network port number 1 to our switch. This is just a standard unmanaged switch. We have P1 and P2, or P1 and P1 terminals here, negative and positive. From left to right, you'll be terminal 1, terminal 2 to provide 12 volts DC to this switch. Again, there is a POV, or I'm sorry, a PoE version of the switch that will have a different power supply and look different. So we're going to come out of network port number 1, and we're going to plug into network or to port number 1 on the switch. We are going to feed our chains. We are going to have our relays, which is not shown in this. This is just a demo kit. I will have a demo kit or a demo of the relays up soon. So we've got these out, and then I'll always reserve port number 5 so that I can plug my computer in and we can communicate with the system, which I will absolutely show you later. Just an unmanaged switch. Here is the Lion Tamer hub. This is where the communications protocols change. So from this side where it says out, this is TCP IP. This side where it says A, that is CAN bus chain A. And on the PoE versions, we don't have an input for power. We have a CAN bus chain B. Even if you have a PoE, it's still limited to 12 sensors per hub. But in our case here, this is a direct power, clearly marked, as you can see, positive, negative, ground. So our out is going to go to our switch. Our chain A is then going to go to the first sensor. And as you can see, this has an all black housing. This is a monitoring sensor. It's going to go into one of these two ports. It does not matter which. And then we're going to come out of the empty port into the next sensor, out, into the next sensor. As you can see, this has a blue housing. This blue housing means that it's a monitoring sensor. This is something we're going to put by the doors, the HVAC, to monitor the air coming into the room. Now, this is the last one on this chain because we're going to break them up 3 and 3. So we're going to have one cable coming in from our previous device, and we're going to have an empty port. This is the terminator. This is the CAN bus terminator. For us in the fire alarm system or fire alarm world, it's a fancy end of line resistor or a shunting jumper on a RS-232 or 485 bus. So we're just going to plug this in, and we have a cable from here to here to here to our channel A, out of our out to our switch, over to our controller, and it's powered by the power supply. We have a single zone system ready to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start mounting our snap track up on the wall. I've got 2 demo kits, so I'm going to demonstrate 2 different zones so that you guys get a more full training. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the power supply, the controller, and the switch on one snap track. Then we're going to put the hub, left and right side, on another snap track, and then we will mount directly to the wall the individual sensors. And we'll go through those steps individually. We'll make sure our snap track is level and that the system looks good on the wall. So we'll go through not just a physical run through of it, but kind of a best practice for installation to keep it clean, make it look good, and make sure that if you have issues or you have problems that you need to trace down, the cleaner the install, the easier it's going to be to track down those issues if you need to in the future. Hello. Today we are going to work on installing the Lion Tamer Generation 3 system. And we are going to do a couple of different demos up here on our wall, with just some tape outlining some basic designs. We're going to start off with something very simple. We've got 3 racks of batteries. We've got 1 HVAC in the room, and we have 1 entrance/exit into the space. So we'll also go over the design while we're doing this. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount over here on this space. We are going to mount the Gen 3 system with the hub, and then we're going to build it out from there. We'll route the cables as nicely as we can, but at the same time, what we're going to try to do is give you the ability to install the system, plus give you a general outline for a basic or a basis of design. Now we're going to start assembling our system. And we're going to start with the power supply. We have our line voltage down, that's ground, neutral, and line voltage. Up here we have voltage minus minus, voltage plus plus, and it's going to give us a 12 volt, 10 amp hour or 10 amp output. Now this is just snap track, so we're just going to snap it on the top, and now that is mounted. If you need to take it off, you can do it with your hands. It's easier to do it with even just a small screwdriver. Down on the bottom, pull down, lift up. And the way that that works is you'll see there's a little spring here in the back. And it just snaps into place. So that's our power supply. We are going to run for today, we're going to run a little just regular computer whip off of it with our neutral, our ground, or I'm sorry, our ground, our neutral, and a hot wire. Don't trust the collars. The collars are not always the same. And it's AC voltage, so it's not that big a difference for line and neutral there. Next up, to prepare the system, we're going to need to put in the controller. Here's the controller. Now your snap track mounting may be a little different than mine. I had to rob some pieces. They're all going to function generally the same. What we want to make sure when you mount the controller is that it's vertical and that the power supply input is facing down. We want this facing down. I keep leaving my parts on the other side of the room. And that's where we are going to install our adapter and our cover to go over it to stop it from being unplugged accidentally. So here we go. Let's mount this up here. And here we are. We're going to mount the controller. Again, we want to make sure that we have the controller with the power supply facing down. There it is. Snaps into place. And I just slid it over because we're going to be coming off of here and then down into the bottom here. Next up is going to be the switch. Now, when you mount it, again, make sure you keep the spring load on top. You're going to want to put that on the top. It's going to compress down, and then you should be able to snap it right on the track. Again, this is just for aesthetics, just so all of our wiring, or as much of our wiring as possible, can go to the same place. There we go. And again, I put it on and then slid it in. Now, because of the way we're setting up today, I'm actually going to put some space in between these devices. Normally, you would take your hub, and your hub will snap right on the one track. But because I'm setting this up so that we can demonstrate multiple zones and using two hubs with a different image, of course, over here. But just because we're doing that, I am going to put another snap track up, and we're going to mount that this hub on this snap track here, and then there will be a second one later in our designs and video. Okay, we are going to move on to mounting the Lion Tamer hub. The out is going to go up into the switch. CAN bus chain A is going to go out and tap to our devices. And we're going to provide it with direct power, because this is a direct power hub with 12 volts DC. So again, SnapTrack, we've seen a couple different styles. Guess what? Moral of the story is they're all the same. And we're just going to snap this on, and it should go in place pretty easily. I believe it goes just like that. So we're going to pull 12 volts From here, come down. Our chain A is going to come out and hit to our devices. And we have our output here is going to come up and tie to our switch. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to start putting some of the Cat5 in and we're going to work our way back. Before we do that, actually, let's go ahead and put this together and then we'll tie our chain backwards into it. And then we'll go over the whole entire thing together. So I'm going to try to get real close to the camera here to show you guys the negative and positive. So when you're installing this, it's very important to get that correct. As I've already mentioned, there is no reverse polarity protection inside of the controller. If you hook it up backwards, it will blow this unit up. It will not be covered by warranty. And all in all, will put you in generally a bad mood. So we're going to go here again. Trust but verify. Negative to negative here. Might as well do it up on camera so you guys can see, right? So there we go. We got our negative black, positive red. This is 12 volts DC. Very polarity sensitive. No protection. So we're going to tighten those up. So that is what I like to do first because I'm going to double check this specific connection multiple times through our process just to make sure that we get it right. Now we've taken the controller down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chassis screw out right here. Not a very big screw. Reach out and grab my adapter here. And I'm going to verify again. Negative to black, positive to red. I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to grab my little boot here. You will see that it fits down over top of it perfectly. So the slots come here. Your screws are accessible. This fits around, so you can put this on and then terminate it afterwards. Next up is going to be the switch. Just a point of fact here. I'm mounting this to just drywall right now. We've got a screw in the stud over here, and we have some anchors in the wall out on this side. When you're installing this, I would absolutely recommend getting some plywood up so that you have something nice and firm to mount to, much like what we would do in the fire alarm world. But I would highly recommend this not go on a drywall surface directly. You're going to want to put a piece of drywall or a piece of plywood up and then mount the equipment to the plywood. Okay, so here we are on the switch, and we're going to come in P1, P2, that's negative, positive. So here's, again, I should do this up there where you guys can see. Not that you need to know how to land a wire, but there we go. We're going to tighten that up. And of course, I let it flip out just at the last moment there. I'm going to take it off camera so I'm not making too many more mistakes up there. All right, so I've got negative to negative verified here, P1 power 1 negative, and then we're going to take our positive over here to the other side, the positive P1 positive. There is something, because I'm just doing this on a drywall board and it is a demo kit that travels. There is something that I'm missing that you guys should not. And there's a ground screw that goes right here. You should have a shielded wire or a 3 conductor to come over here and pick up the ground. And it should all be grounded back to your, basically your earth ground to your power supply. I'm not going to be doing that, but it's something that you absolutely should. I'm not going to be doing it because, again, this system is set up to be traveling, and we're never connected to necessarily a true earth ground. So it's not set up to do so. So this is where we're at. We've got our switch. It's going to go up here on our wall, just like snap track right in place. So we've got our power supply stuff here. We're going to route these up, and we will dress them up as good as we can. Um, and then we will get one more power supply in here to our hub, which will come up and land here. And then we're going to start with the Cat 6. So the wiring that you're going to want out from here is going to be Cat 5e or Cat 6. I would recommend just going with Cat 6. That way there's no confusion of which cable is out there, just in case somebody tries to get in with a lower cost cable. Now we got our DC negative in. Now we're going to move over and do the same. Again, all I'm doing is I'm pressing in on this with a screwdriver. I got big fingers, so it's hard for me to sometimes press these little buttons here with it. So I use a screwdriver. I push it all the way down, put our wire in place, and then just release that screwdriver, and she's all terminated there. Then we take it back to our snap track. And she snaps right in place. So this is the core setup of the unit. I'm going to terminate all the wiring. Again, I'm going to use my screwdriver here with a pointer. We're going to go DC negative, DC negative, DC positive, DC positive. So what I will do is from left to right, I'll do terminal 1 and terminal 3 to get my 12 volts. And I will do terminal 2 to terminal 4 to get my 12 volts, so that I don't have all the wires landing underneath of a single terminal. So when I get that done, I'll pop back up here and I'll show you guys. And we'll try to take the camera in a little bit closer to get a look at it. Okay, we have our power terminations up here. We're going to sneak the camera up closer. I need to watch out for all the cables. There we go. There we go. Okay. So we're going to go in here. We're going to see what we did. We see we've got 2 of our red cables here under terminal number 4. They're going over to these guys here. So that's going to be terminal 2 and terminal 4 are powering here, providing our 12 volts. And then we've got terminal 1 and terminal 3 providing 12 volts. And then you'll also notice we have the ground coming here to earth ground. That is where all your ground should go when you put all this together. Now, my recommendation always is to put a bus bar in and do a proper ground terminal, a wire nut with a single cable over here. Electrically, I guess it's fine, but it is not good craftsmanship. So here we go. We got all the stuff ready for voltage. As you can see, I do not have the 120 plugged up and ready to go yet. We're not quite ready to get there. So up here, we installed anchors and whatnot. Over here, because we're going to be taking this stuff on and off the wall, we are going to we're going to do it a little differently. We're moving some tape and stuff around, but you guys will get the understanding of it. When you mount them, you guys will have to mount it depending on what your application is. Next up, our Cat6 cables. We are going to start at the beginning. A very good place to start, or so the song goes. So the first thing we're going to want to do, as we went over in previous video, is port number 1 is for the Lion Tamer network with its controllers. Its switches, its hubs, the relays, and all that stuff is going to come out of port 1. Port number 2 is dedicated to TCP/IP Modbus. I don't have a device that's going to talk to us in TCP/IP Modbus. I am looking for one so that we can do a proper demonstration of it. But for right now, we're going to focus on the Lion Tamer aspect of it. And that's it. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to plug our Cat6 cable into port 1. It's got to go somewhere. It's a bit longer of a cable than I need. If you guys want to get shorter cables, by all means, go for it. So there we go. I have now taken port 1 over to the switch. So that gives me 4 new ports that I can come off of. Let's move in and take a look. That gives me 4 new ports. I think I can raise that up some even. And there. So we're coming out of port number 1, coming into port number 1 on the switch. Now, I like to reserve my last port for my computer so I can plug into it. I like to start in sequential order. So I've got a plug now going into one of my ports. Technically, it can go into any of these, but I'm going to plug it into port number 2. And this is the out. So we're going to focus down here on the hub. So up here, as we can see, is chain A. So that means the bottom is the out. That means that is out to the switch. And we are going to plug that in. So now I have a chain going from our network port 1 over to the switch, which provides me 4 additional ports. If I needed more ports, I could just get a bigger switch, or I could put another switch in and take one port out and daisy chain it over and add more ports if I need it. So now I'm coming out of our switch and into the Lion Tamer hub. This is where we are converting from TCP/IP on this side to CAN bus communications protocol on this side. That is what will communicate with our sensors, which we're going to go and we're going to place up over here now. Okay, so we're going to start talking about the design for the example that we have up on the wall here. So what we have is an entrance. We have one HVAC that's just a crack unit. So we're just pulling air in from the top and throwing air out at the bottom, or air in from the bottom, throwing air out the top. We're just mechanically mixing basically the general area of the room. You can see here clearly there are 2 different types of sensors. The blue housing is the reference sensor. Sorry about that. The reference sensor, that's going to check the air coming into the room. The black housing is going to be the monitoring sensors. These are the sensors that we're actually going to watch the batteries. So in our scenario up here, we've got 1, 2, 3 chains of batteries. So from a design standpoint, we can place one here, one here, and that'll cover our batteries. And seeing as how we only have the one entrance in and out of the room, we're not pulling HVAC from outside in, we're just circulating the air in here. We're going to have one reference sensor to monitor the air quality coming into the room. So we're going to mount these up on the wall. We're going to give them an attempt with just some double-sided sticky tape, Velcro stuff, and then we'll move on from there. All right, we have our placement of our sensors. We have two up here for monitoring of the lithium ion batteries. We have one down here that's going to be referenced watching the air coming into the space. We know we're going to need a terminator. I'm going to come out of this hub, out of chain A. I'm going to come up here to number one, sensor number two, and reference sensor number one or sensor number three. So I'm going to have an in and out, an in and out, and an in. And at the end of it, which we've already discussed, we're going to need to place our terminator. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in place now. Now it's in, and I shouldn't have to worry about it from here out. Now, we're doing this with some double-sided Velcro stuff. So I might have to record this a couple times, and we may just jump to just putting a couple screws into it. Again, this whole wall is going to be covered with wood and shelving in the future, so I'm not really concerned with the wall. So for me, I like to work either from the back, which is the end of the system, and work my way back, or the back of the system to the front. So far, we have went from our port one on the network of the controller to the switch, from the switch to the hub. So I think I'm going to stay on that same pathway. If I've got a cable long enough, I should have thought of this beforehand when I mounted this, to get from our channel A. I want to be to the back. And then I want to be into here. So again, we've got a ratchet nest. This is going to fall into your own cable management systems and how you manage it. I will try to clean it up in the future, but for getting it together to show you guys and demonstrate, this is what we're doing for now. So we are now through our line tamer hub to our first sensor. So now, that's not the right cable. So now we need to grab our other cables and we need to come into our out of our lion tamer sensor number one. Into line tamer sensor number two. Now I'm going to do this on purpose because you guys see I went into this side, came out of that side. This time I'm going to go into this side and I'm going to come out of the other one because it doesn't matter. It does not matter. I tend to keep things normal and in order. That makes it easier for me to troubleshoot if I have issues in the future. I just want to demonstrate to you that it does not make a difference. So we're now going to come down here and we're going to tie into our reference sensor, which is just long enough for our cables here. There we go. And now we have our terminator already in place. So now we're going to go from front to back, back to front. We're going to check all of our terminations. And one of the things you will notice, I still do not have 120 volts going to this system. So I'm going to do my voltage first. Voltage out. And guess what I'm going to check? You guys aren't going to be able to see it very well, but I am going to check right here. And I've got positive, positive, and negative to negative. Yes, I just checked it one more time. I'm out of here. I am in P1 negative, P1 positive, negative, positive. That all checks out. Move my table because all good old fire alarm guys carry a table with them in their trucks. We have a positive 12 volts, negative 12 volts, and a ground. I can trace that ground up, and I'm terminated earth ground. Now, because of the nature of this system, I'm actually going to disconnect this wire, this ground out of here. Ignore that. It's just because I don't want a random loose wire that's actually, because I'm in my garage, actually not tied to a ground out here. So it's a useless wire. Keep it out of the way. So there was our 12 volts power. Now let's go with our network. Network to port one. From network one to port one. From port two to our out, which is the TCP IP side of the Lion Tamer hub. Out of the hub I'm now coming into first sensor, out of the first sensor, into our second sensor, out of our second sensor, down and into our reference sensor, and I have a terminator. I have, with the exception of 120 volts, a complete Lion Tamer Gen 3. Let's get 120 volt wired up to it. We're not going to power it on until we're back. We are going to begin by opening a Google Chrome window. We are going to input the IP address 172.16.0.1. It will bring us up to this login screen. There is a possibility that before you get to this stage, you will be asked to proceed as a warning because it is an unsigned website. If you see that, click a little line that says more information or more details or details, and then it'll be a click to proceed. It may ask you again, if are you sure? Just click yes, and it will take you to this prompt. So we don't have a username, we don't have a password, so we can't forget a password or we can't forget a username. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a new user. To begin, we got to register an administrator. Every system has to have at least one administrator. So we are going to input the word test unit properly here. And we're going to put a password of testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. Password should match 1, 2, 3, 4. And we are going to register that user. In our demo setup here, we have 2 monitoring sensors. This is very self-explanatory, and we are utilizing 1 reference sensor. The number of total zones, we have 1. Controller, seeing as how we're not going to be using relays, we're just going to leave it at TCP IP. The other option is TCP IP Modbus plus relays. But we don't have our relay board to put up there, so we are using only TCP IP. And remember, port number 2 on the controller is dedicated to connection for that TCP IP Modbus. Next up, you can add additional users. That seems pretty self-explanatory. You click that, you can add other users in. And next up is configure sensors. So we're going to move on to the configure sensors. Here you'll see we've got some information at the top, configure sensor screen. We've got a Modbus, we've got to replace sensors, and we've got done. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here with add a new zone. And I'm going to call this, when I don't click randomly off of the screen, battery room A. The number of monitoring sensors here is going to be 2. And you can use the arrows or you can just select the number here. So we've got a number 1, and we're going to create that zone. And right now, so we've got 2 monitoring sensors configured, 1 reference sensor configured. Click done. That's what we've got to do. Now the system is up and operating to actually function. We did all of our wiring checks on the previous videos, and that's how long it took to get this system programmed. Now, from a TCP IP controller side, there's more data entry and more input, but to get your system up and functioning, you now have a functioning sensor, or I'm sorry, a functioning system. While we're looking at this, let's go over here to the next tab of users. If we want to add a user, we can just click register a user. You can assign them a role of admin or installer. And then you can put the password, and then you repeat the password. I'm not going to add one in. There's no need to. That's pretty commonplace. Right here, you're going to see an IP address. This is the IP address on port number 2 of the controller. This is the IP address for the TCP IP Modbus. Now, you can go here and edit. You select your version if you want to use IPv6 or IPv4. Set your new address. Set your gateway. And if you need to, you can set your DNS server. I'm not going to click all through this right now. I'm going to do a separate video on setting that IP address. I will give you warning right now. It will tell you that it takes 10 minutes for it to fully matriculate through the system. Believe it when it tells you that 10 minutes, and most likely what you're going to end up seeing is maybe a slight bit over 10 minutes. And you'll see a little thing here that says pending over here by the config. So we're not going to mess with that. We'll create a video dedicated to that just so you guys can see it. I don't want to do it now and lock myself out from doing things for 10 minutes. We have our monitoring sensors, reference sensors, and our control. And if we change the system, let's say, which we are going to do here in a future video, we're going to add 2 more monitoring sensors and another reference sensor. We're going to split the room in half, and we're going to change it from a crack unit, which is just a recirculation unit, over to an HVAC system that has the potential to pull in fresh air or outside air from that space, which will add a reference sensor for us. And then we're going to split the room and add 3 more racks of batteries, which will split this into 2 zones. So we'll do all of that stuff in the future. So there's nothing here for us to do right now. Let's take a look at the data. This is exactly what this is in fire alarm world. This is just the history. So you can look at your dates that you want to pull your data from, view or download. Now there is a raw data tab here, and that is mostly going to be used by the manufacturer. It's not something that you really need to focus on. And then you're also able to download the sensor map, and we have downloaded it. We'll open it up we'll open up a notepad or WordPad here. I guess it didn't come in. Let's try that again. Oh, connection. Oh, so that's my bad. There we go. There's our information for our sensors. So we're going to close that down, and we'll go back over here to our dashboard. Now we're going to start here from left to right. We're in battery room A. We're going to go here to our first sensor, and we can give it a plain English title. So we're going to say left sensor. Let's clean it up a little bit. Left sensor. We'll go here. Right sensor. And here we're going to say man door. So now not only do we have the sensor information for the serial number, we now have a plain English sensor name so that you can go to it. If you're in a built-out data center, rack 32, rack 57, so on and so forth, those would be good titles so that you know exactly where in the room that is located. Next over, you can see the firmware version of the sensors. The type of sensor that it is a monitoring sensor or a reference sensor that is dictated by the serial number of the unit, not necessarily anything that you have to do. There's nothing you can do to change it. It will automatically populate. The status, we'll see here, battery room is okay. We have nothing. We have no flags or red flags or yellow flags going on in them. We have systems okay. Our temperatures are all generally near each other. Their sensors are not located very far away. The relative humidity outside right now is 53.2, as you guys can see here. And the scalar value is right here. This is the value that's going to be read when we have a event or a VOC or the electrolytic solvent vapors are presented to the sensors, which we'll take a look at here in just a moment. Over here, you'll see standby. So you can place the units in standby. Now, if you test the sensors, the light on the sensor will still activate and show red, but none of the logic internally will happen because that sensor is basically bypassed. So that is the system right there. I mean, it's a very simple system, very easy to use, very easy to set up. And if you look at it from a local application standpoint, it's very simple to design. And right now, I'm going to step over here if I can and grab my VOC that I'm using for testing. And we are going to present to the reference, the reference sensor first. So you'll see on the reference sensor that we have an alarm active. Stepping back and looking at the system, we have a red light flashing on our reference sensor. We have a red light on our Lion Tamer hub, but both of the other systems are shown both of our other sensors are shown in green and just fine. What you'll also notice here is this is now in the lockout stage. So somebody's opened the door, they've presented a contaminant, a VOC to the reference sensor, and then it drifts back and ends up in the monitoring sensors. You'll see that on the screen, the system stays green. But if you're looking at the lights on your units, you will notice that they light up red. You'll also see that the reference sensor is still showing 5.52 on the scalar value. The left sensor is showing 5.01 on the scalar value, but we haven't presented anything to the right sensor. It has picked up a little bit, but very little bit on the sides here. And I'm being very particular and getting very close with this chemical so that it doesn't bleed up too much. So we have a fully functioning system. And with that, I think that should be enough to go on. You guys should be able to manage your way through a system. The only difference is you're going to have, hopefully, a lot more sensors than I do. Okay, we're moving on to the next step here. And we have added a second hub to the system. And before we started the video, I went ahead and wired up the 12 volts DC. I have double and triple checked the polarity on it so that we can just jump into the wiring. Now, in this design scenario, we have an opening right here that's not closed. So we're going to count all of this area as one zone. We're going to use two hubs. Hub 1 is going to stay exactly the way it is. Hub 2 is going to put one here on a battery rack, and sensor number 2 on another battery rack. And now we've changed out our crack unit, which was just recirculation, to an HVAC system now that has some ductwork, and we have 4 points coming into the spaces. Now, seeing as how all of this air has one common chase or plenum that it's coming out to, or ductwork, we only need one sensor. We don't need to put one here and one here. We just need the one sensor. Seeing as how all of this is one zone. And here in a bit, we're going to put a door in here, and we're going to split this into 2 zones, and I'm going to show you how you can still utilize the one sensor for reference sensors through 2 zones. And we'll get into that in a minute. But for right now, we're going to just place our sensors. And we have our black housing sensors here. which, as we've talked about before, is the actual monitoring sensors. That's the front and the back. So you can see the sensor facing, and then you see the input output for the Cat 6 cable. And our reference sensor. So we're going to go ahead and place our reference sensor, and I want the air, seeing how the air is going to blow this way. I'm going to put my finger pointing in the direction of the sensor face, so you can see the sensor face right there. So I'm pointing that way. I don't want it in line with the airflow. We could be throwing dust, dirt, other particulates into this sensor, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to install it face down so that the air coming across travels perpendicular to the actual sensor face. So we're going to stick this up here, and that's our reference sensor. Now these are just, we'll call them water cooled, so not a lot of air movement in here. So we're going to have the face of these guys facing to the front. Sensor 1, or we'll call it sensor 3 here. Sensor 1 on hub 2. Sensor 2 on hub 2. Again, both of the faces are here. Now, let's say we had an airflow where we had fans on this side blowing this way. Well, we'd want to move this to this side and then put the facing here. So it would be facing that way. But in our scenario, let's say we have air blowing from the back to the front, and we can put it right back in as we were just before. There we go. Now we're going to wire it up, which I'll pause and I'll put the wiring in. We're going to come out of our hub of CAN bus chain A. We're going to come into the reference sensor, out of the reference sensor, which I told you guys before. It doesn't matter what order they are in. We're going to come out of our reference sensor into one of our monitoring sensors right here. And then we're going to come out of our monitoring sensor to the last monitoring sensor. And we are going to put the terminator into the last sensor here. So this is our bottom sensor. Here's the terminator. It's a simple plug in. And now we're ready to run the wire. So I'm going to pause that and put the wiring in. All right, we took about 10 minutes to wire it all together here, and we'll walk it through. I said I already had the 12 volts wired in before we started earlier. We have our output coming here and going up to port number 3 on the switch. We have our CAN bus channel A coming over here to in on our monitoring sensor. I'm sorry, this is our reference sensor. Out into our hub number 2, sensor number 1, and then hub number 2, sensor number 2. The rest of it remained the same. Now, seeing as how we only have 6 total sensors here, we could have done all of this with one hub very easily. We would have just moved our terminator from here, taken our cable that's going from here over, taken a cable from there, plugged it in here, kept our daisy chain, and put the terminator right there. Now that's for a one zone system. But because we have plans, we want to think forward, we have plans of separating this and creating 2 zones. Unfortunately, we can't create zones inside of a single hub. It is something I'm asking them to think about, but for right now, if you have one hub, you have one zone. Now, inside of one space, you can have, or inside of one zone, you can have 5 to 9, I think, total hubs, each of them handling 12 sensors. So when we get to those type of numbers, then you can break up, you could have 9 individual zones, but you can't have 10. So it all goes on the number of hubs. If you have one hub, you have one zone. We now have 2 hubs, so we have the potential to create a zone 1 and a zone 2, which is what we're going to do in a bit when we add a door in between these. But this is where it's at and running right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to flip over to a different type of recording. We're going to do screen record, and we are going to convert our existing system, which has a single hub, to monitoring sensors and a reference sensor. Now we're going to change it to a 2-hub and 2 monitoring sensors and 1 reference sensor for each one of those hubs. Okay, we should be ready to move on. We're all wired up. We are going to switch over to capture and go to our website. We have 172.16.0.1. As you can see, it's not secure. It is directly into the server, the web server on the controller, so we're not worried about it. So our passcode here, our username is test unit. Passcode was testing1234, and we are going to log in. As you can see, we have a misconfigured. So let's go over to our settings. I did click this already up to 4. We have 2 reference sensors, and that's it. We're going to go ahead and click our configure sensor. So before, let me go back and show you what I've done. This is, all I have done. So previously we had 2 monitoring sensors. I've taken that to 4. I've taken that to 2. Update the settings. System settings updated. You'll see down in the lower right-hand corner. We're going to configure. We're in battery room A. We're going to edit that. Seeing how everything is going to be here, we're going to make that update the zone. So you'll see here we have configured, checkbox, 4 of 4 monitoring sensors, 2 of 2 reference sensors. So as you can see here, status is okay, and we have all of our sensors in check. And that right there will give us everything that we need to do. That system is set up and ready to go. It's going to be putting out the TCP/IP Modbus on port number 2 of the controller and handing it off. We do have our relay unit in place. We are going to be installing it just on a cable. I did not get the mounting kit for it because I don't want to mount it on our system, but it mounts on the SnapTrack exactly the same as we would any of the other parts on the wall. So let's switch back over to it real quick. So as you can see on that top SnapTrack, we've got our power supply, our controller, and our switch. What I would do in this case is move the switch over to the left just a little bit, and in that empty spot right out on the edge, I would put the relay unit. Again, SnapTrack, no need to go through all that, but because I'm going to be using mine differently, I don't want to get a mounting kit for it, and I will break it down and show it all to you though. So that was it. We're going to go back over to our capture, back to our website. That was really all that we needed to do. We needed to up 2 sensors here. Now we can go into our sensors here and identify them. Say, hey, this is our reference sensor, HVAC reference sensor. If we type in the box, HVAC reference sensor, we have, we'll again type in the box, room A-1, battery 1. We'll go here, room A-1, battery 2. And there we have it. Now we know our left sensor, our right sensor. Let's go ahead and save these, and we are good. Now they're all in, and you can see our humidity, our scalar value, and our temperature in the space right now. So that is it. And then, of course, if you go to the settings. We changed our monitoring up to 4 from 2, reference up to 2 from 1. We kept it at 1 zone, and we are only doing TCP/IP. We went to our configure sensors. We had our battery room A. We clicked edit. This is our battery room A. We clicked up 2. We clicked up 1, and we clicked update zone. Now, this time I'm going to cancel it because we've already done the work. And that is all she wrote. that is it. That system is ready to go on TCP/IP Modbus. We will be switching this over in a minute. Actually, we may go ahead and set that up here shortly and do the relays so you can see it. Actually, we could probably go here. And now we're going to add a module. Well, just click add a module. And this is what I say all the time to people is they come in a bank of 16, but you have 15 usable relays. So it goes to relay 16, but you have to remember relay number 1 is a watchdog timer. In this scenario, that timer is X amount of seconds. It is not in communication with the controller. It is going to change states. Now, if you want a safe version, you can click on, well, not in this one, I guess. A watchdog timer is not able to be changed state, so, but you can make the other ones. And here we go. So we have relay 1, watchdog timer. Can't change it. Can't change it at all. Okay. Excuse me. Relay 1 cannot be edited. That's good. That's something I've learned here with you guys today. Relay 2. This could just be a general, what us fire alarm people would call a general alarm. Normally energized or not normally energized. So this would be your fail-safe. I would not recommend this to be normally energized for a system alarm or an alarm value at all, because in the event that something happens and you lose power to it, that relay is going to de-energize and is going to cause an alarm. So we're going to say it is relay number 2 is our system alarm. What do I want? I absolutely want it latching. I do not want it normally energized, but I do want it latching. And system number 2 is system error. Again, for us fire alarm guys, that is what we would call a trouble or supervisory signal. In this case, I'm going to call it a trouble signal. We do not want it normally energized. Or do we? We might. Actually, that one, let's go normally energized on that one, because in case it loses, the whole system loses power, we can identify it. So do we want it latching? Doesn't really matter. It's off here. So there we go. So we're going to go there. And that right there is enough to tie in relay number 2 as your alarm and relay number 3 as your trouble to your fire alarm system. Please bear in mind, if you're reading your Form C contacts before you plug this up, this is going to be reversed. Normally open is going to be closed. Normally closed is going to be open. So you're going to put them on separately. So if you have an input that reads, if you have an input that's capable of reading normally closed, that's okay. Most of them don't. So you're able to go across the normally open set of contacts, put your resistor in bridge of that from common to normally closed, which will be open in the system normal status. And then if we lose power or if the system gets an error, it's going to change states. Now, let's say we want more granular data. We have enough here on relays that we can map out individual sensors to individual relays. It's a little bit of overkill, but you can do it. Now, we have, in this case, we have everything set up. Wait a minute, we don't want to use that. We want to go back to unused, sorry. In this case, we only have one zone, so I'm using just full system alarms and system errors. In a little bit, we're going to change this mapping again because we are going to split this into 2 zones. So we may not care at this point whether it's in room 1 or room 1A or whatever we called it in the programming. But when we start splitting this up and we have different responses, we're going to want to identify those. And some of you guys have already seen here, we have a room, battery room A alarm and battery room A error. So that's our alarm and trouble for the zone. This is our system. This is our zone. and these are our sensors, and that's how this breaks down. So it's pretty easy to go through. So while I'm here doing this, let's just go ahead and reset this thing back to clean, and we're going to put everything here as unused. And let's say we put, well, we can't do that, can't we? We've got to put the zones in first. So I'll tell you what, let's reconfigure the system, and then we will remap this. So, but for right now, let's go back to alarm, and we want our error. We want this normally energized, and I want the alarm latching. So that's where we were before, and let's keep it there. There is a special note. To unlatch the relays, you will need to come in here and unlatch the relays. So if it goes into alarm on our latching, we're going to need to come in here and to unlatch it. And the reason for that is so that you can't have someone just smack a button and move on with life after a venting event, so that we don't have a fire because someone got a little trigger happy. So that is that, and we will stop this recording, and we will move on to the next one, which we're going to be setting up a dual zone or a 2-zone system. Okay, we're back here. We have reconfigured the wall where we have hub number 1 is coming up. We're feeding a monitoring sensor and a monitoring sensor. You'll see we moved our terminator up to here. Out of hub number 2, we are now feeding a reference sensor, out, monitoring sensor to a monitoring sensor, and we moved our terminator over to our last reference sensor. And now we're going to go to the computer screen, and we are going to reconfigure this. And I forgot to put the little door in, so we're going to imagine that we've got a door here, and I'll put it in before we get started on the next go. Okay, we put the door in, and we have taken the first steps off camera, and I decided that I should probably show you guys this, that when you're changing zones around and we're adding zones, that we need to make sure we disconnect our hubs. So what I've done is I've disconnected our hubs, and I will pop over to the capture real quick, and we'll bounce back and forth here a couple times so you can see this. And what you're going to wait for is this whole line to go blank, and it'll read the errors. And then you're going to edit and configure your zone, like I've done here, which this is hub 1, so it's just going to be the 2 monitoring sensors at the top of the screen in room B up there, or room A, I'm sorry, room A up there, the one we started with. And so we got nothing to do here, and there's no monitoring sensor, reference sensors on this one, so it's just the 2 monitoring sensors. So that's where we are. Let's go back over to the screen. So those are the 2 at the very top. You'll see that they're flashing. So now what we're going to do is we'll flip back over to screen capture. Go to our site here. We're going to take a look at B. We're going to go to edit. I believe I already have this set up. That's the front room there that we added second. And we have 2 reference sensors right here and 2 monitoring sensors in this. So we don't need to update it. Well, I'll go ahead and click update so you can see. There's nothing to be saved there. You'll also notice that these bars are completely blank. Now we're going to flip back over to our camera. I'll try to rotate the thing so you can see. And we are going to plug in our new hub, or our next hub. So there we go. Now that I'm back at the microphone, you'll see that we're flashing down here on the hub, and that we have our 4 lights here flashing as well. So let's go back over to screen capture and into our, this is configure zones. If you don't know how to get here, we'll do a real quick look. So right here, you'll see they're already split up. It still has an error. It hasn't come along yet, but we're going to go to configure sensors. And it shows that it's got 3 of 2. So what we're going to do is we're just going to be patient, and we're going to let the clock go. You'll notice, I'm going to flip back over to the camera. Our light is still flashing here pretty good, pretty fast. So it's still cycling on. We do have green light, so we do have detection ability here, but we're not fully updated yet. So we're going to wait this whole thing to map out, and then it'll go up here to the switch and then into the controller, and then it'll tell us that all things are good. So back over to the capture, and here we go. It says it's happy. Now I'm going to take one more jump over to the camera, and you'll notice that now both of these hubs are flashing at slower pace. So they're polling kind of the way they're supposed to. All of our sensors are flashing green. Everything is working up through them. Patience is a big deal here. So we're going to go back over to capture, back down to our site here, and we should click done. And now we have 2 zones, a battery room A and a battery room B. Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about and show you was right up here, we have an HVAC system. I guess we're going to go back to the camera. We have an HVAC system followed by the orange tape there. The big square is our HVAC, and we have ductwork coming out with a monitoring sensor right there. Now that reference sensor. That reference sensor is connected to hub 2, but it needs to protect both rooms. So let's go back over to our, if I can open this, there we go. Our capture, screen capture, there we go. Configure sensors. We're in room B. This is our hub, and we are going to configure our reference sensors. Now, I happen to know that the 9545 is the item in question. So all we're going to do is simply select battery room A and battery room B. We are going to click done. Now you'll see it also populates up here, HVAC reference sensor. HVAC reference sensor is now located in both of them. But you'll also notice that we have a misconfiguration on battery room A. The sensors are all reporting, but we're not quite configured correctly. Why? Because we added a reference sensor over to unit A. So we're going to give that a couple minutes, and it didn't even take that long, and we are back to green. So now we have a dual zone system right here, battery room A. That's our original one in the back. Battery room B. Physically, HVAC ref, which should be HVAC, not HCAF. I'll fix that here. Let's go ahead and just fix that. HVAC ref. And that should be good. Check mark. And it automatically corrected it up on the top. There we go. Why didn't somebody tell me I made that mistake? Okay, so our HVAC reference is physically connected to our battery room B, but we are sharing that with battery room A. So we don't have to have an extra sensor. We use the one sensor and are able to cover both of those zones. So let's go over it here under our camera view. So here is hub number 1, or battery room A. It's our original room back here. Battery room A, hub 1. Battery room B, hub 2. It's got a reference sensor here at the door. We're not sharing the distance from here to there and the mixing of the air to get back there. That's something we don't want to have. It's too much distance between them. I think it's 10 meters or something along those lines. That 30 feet, and we're just going to imagine that's more than 30 feet. But this unit right here could bring in contaminated air, which could be set right in front of both of these two monitoring these two monitoring sensors, and right here between these two monitoring sensors. So our reference sensor is picking up any kind of contaminant that's coming into this room. That way we can trigger the lockout if need be. So that is, let's do this now. Let's go back over to our screen capture. Let's go here. We're going to ignore my email signs going off, and we're going to go ahead and select our relays, because now we have relays for it. And as I told you before, you are able to do the zones, the system, or if you want to assign individual sensors to it. Say, hey, I want to know when the HVAC reference alarm comes on. So let's go to relay 4 right here. And I don't care about anything else. I just want to know when HVAC reference alarm goes on. We are not going to make that latching. We'll let that float because the system alarm is going to pick that up as well, and that's going to become latching. But this will give us another monitoring point to say, hey, that came from the HVAC. We could do the same for the man door alarm, which we should have wrote reference there too. We could have. And the same thing here, and say, hey, these are something is in the area. That way we can investigate what is contaminating our space. That way, maybe in the future, we have a way to mitigate those type of actions that introduce VOCs or other other vapors into or gases into our spaces that our detectors pick up. So that is it. I'm going to go back to the dashboard here. That's all she wrote for us. That's going to wrap this part up. We will do a short video on the relay itself, the relay module itself, but we'll do that from inside. It's quite simple. So we will go over that internally. And if you have any questions, feel free to call or email, and we will be able to help you out. So I guess that's goodbye for now.